But while you were sharpening your sword, do you know how I prepared for today? I learned. I know your language, your traditions, your beliefs, which villages to tame and which to burn.
The invasion of the Japanese island of Tsushima was a very well-planned and calculated attack. Prior to officially making contact with the island's samurai clans who would inevitably rally to the defense of their home, Khotun Khan studied his enemies. He learned the ways of the samurai. He studied the perceived code of honor, how they conducted themselves on the battlefield, how they delegated over the island and its people, and, possibly most importantly, which villages would resist or aid in their invasion. Almost immediately after making contact with 99% of Tsushima's samurai forces, the Khan and his army insulted them, disrespecting the corpse and traditions of a duel by immediately lighting Arunobu Adachi on fire and swiftly beheading him. This would bait the samurai to charge down the hill, to defend their home and defend their honor, but this only resulted in a full-blown massacre. Every samurai was killed, entire clans were wiped out, and the island's leader, Lord Shimada, was captured. The island's defenses were non-existent after this initial battle, save for a few notable figures such as Lady Masuko or Sensei Ishikawa, who are skilled warriors in their own right that missed out on the battle, as personal vendettas that had been brewing prior to the Mongol invasion finally exploded, demanding their primary focus over the Mongol invaders. Outside of those two, the warrior monk Norio might have had the best opportunity to resist, albeit for a short period of time. Without any proper aid, the monks themselves would have been quickly overrun, falling to dissension and internal disagreement on whether if they should be fighting against the Mongols or not. Besides those three, the only remaining enemies the Mongols would possibly have had to deal with was the clan of Yarikawa, who was resisting to the north. Yarikawa itself was an anomaly on the island. It was shunned and exiled by Lord Shimada. They weren't even called upon to help in the Battle of Komoda Beach. Hate from Lord Shimada to the people of Yarikawa and the people of Yarikawa to Lord Shimada ran deep. So deep that even during the events of the game, as Shimada was freed from captivity and ready to lead an assault to take back the island from the Mongols, the past treachery of Yarikawa and Shimada's brutality in putting down the rebellion from over 15 years ago was a constant barrier, one that was only saved by Yarikawa having the ability to put their faith in the ghost, and someone who had a mutual goal in mind as Lord Shimada, thus securing the support of Yarikawa not to Shimada, but to the ghost. But going back to the Khan, for an army to have a numerical advantage, flexibility in tactics and overall strategy, as well as a deep understanding of the enemy they're invading, the invasion should have been a resounding success, especially after wiping out the island's entire main defense. But it wasn't. So what happened? Today we're going to be going over why. How the Khan, in a twist of irony, fell into the same trap he expected his enemies to fall into. He didn't expect the samurai, any samurai, to operate outside of their strict code. If you fight them within that code, you're fighting on the enemy's territory. But if you understand that code, and your enemy's strict adherence to it while engaging outside of it in a new and unfamiliar way, you'll dominate them. The Khan's confidence in their samurai's over-reliance on that code would be the Khan's downfall, suffering the same kind of predictability he believed his enemies would suffer from.
Unless you join my empire's fight for peace.
You don't want allies. You want soldiers to overthrow the shogun.
Now to begin, we must first look at the Khan's plan for Tsushima. Tsushima was never a war of conquest, or dominance was never the actual goal. Tsushima itself was actually a means to an end. The mainland island of Japan was the real goal. Khotun Khan wanted to invade Japan, with Tsushima being a perfect start. It would personally introduce the Khan to Japanese culture, politics, and history. He had already enlisted spies before his invasion to better understand the obstacles he would undoubtedly face on the island, but no matter how much information and knowledge was passed through to the Khan and his forces, there was still one major thing the spies couldn't provide his army with, and that was actual experience fighting Japanese forces, specifically the samurai. Tsushima was also intended to be a place of recruitment and resupply for the Mongol army before its massive invasion of Japan. It's this reason why Khotun Khan invaded, and why he would appear to attempt to reason with Lord Shimada throughout the game's story, trying to appeal to his honor or sense of responsibility over the people of the island. If Shimada would surrender and tell the island to quit its resistance, then less people would be killed. There'd be less pillaging, less plundering, less death and chaos. something the Khan would hope would satisfy Shimada, and on the flip side of that, he can turn around, display himself as the liberator and benefactors of the island of Tsushima, and begin to recruit for the bigger invasion ahead of them. It would have been perfect had everything gone according to plan. It was great to resupply, to recruit, and to gain experience for the army. Strategically, it was a solid plan. However, tactically, a few errors were made that I think in the long run cost the Khan dearly. The biggest one would of course be Jin. The Khan horribly underestimated him, and the Khan actually has a pattern of recognizing someone as a threat and trying to get them to submit, which I'll show in just a second. But to be fair for the Khan for a second, Jin himself is a little bit of an oddity as it is. You can't really account for his survival at both Komoda Beach and Kaso Kanada, nor can you account for how these series of humiliating losses would make him resort to new ways of fighting. New ways of fighting that he probably would have never adapted to had it not been for the help of Yuna. Those things you can't really plan for. What you can plan for is if the objective of the war changes, if the rules of engagement change, and if the lines now become blurred. As Jin's legend as the Ghost grew, it divided the people of Tsushima in terms of recognizing who to follow. The Ghost was gaining support and favor of the people, slowly transforming the war into a war of freedom, patriotism for the island of Tsushima, the defense of their home. The Khan, meanwhile, still recognized Shimada as the proper leader. The war he was fighting was based on tradition and honor, the pillars that dictated Shimada's leadership, who the Khan still recognized as the proper leader of Tsushima. So in the Khan's eyes, Shimada was the key to ending all resistance and gaining a pool of recruits. But as Shimada withered away in the Khan's captivity, Jin was gaining support by any means necessary to save his uncle. The Khan was aware pretty early on that Jin had survived their encounter. He also knew Jin was beginning to break his samurai code. Reports of his men being stabbed in the back and witnessing unconventional fighting were beginning to flood in. But instead of trying to make any kind of contact with Jin, or recognizing how dangerous someone with the swordsmanship of a samurai but the unpredictability of his own forces could really be, the Khan would instead use Jin's deviation to try to get Shimada to finally break and ally with him. He would use the safety of his people. The sooner he surrenders, the less death the people of Tsushima would suffer. When that doesn't work, then he would use Jin's honor as a leveraging tool. It's not until the legend of the Ghost has reached the point of no return, recruiting the people of Yarikawa and killing the Khan's best general, Temuge, does the Khan finally acknowledge how dangerous Jin is. But at this point, it's too late. The Khan had already insulted Shimada by repeatedly believing Shimada would turn against the people of Tsushima, then leaving him to starve in the walls of Castle Kanada, while he heads north to overtake his ancestral land, taking up Castle Shimada as his personal stronghold. The Khan does nothing but reinforce Shimada's resolve for the fight against him. Meanwhile, Jin's resolve would too double down after the death of Taka.
I too have pride in family. And I know what it's like to live in their shadow. Why should we settle for scraps when we deserve to be legends?
The Khan made a big mistake in solely looking towards one person as a way to achieve his goal. Shimada would be given a fair hand followed swiftly by brutality, initially being offered a chance to end all bloodshed by just surrendering on Komoda Beach. And then when Jin goes to face the Khan aims to break Jin as a way to make Shimada give in. It's his punishment for his resilience. It's a tactic the Khan would later repeat and use against Jin when he couldn't appease Jin the same way, freeing Taka and offering the Ghost's head in return for his freedom.
Your friend died for you. Now I must find another, and you must choose again.
Taka would bravely defy the offer by attacking the Khan, who would then just swiftly kill him, and coldly tell Jin more people would die so long as he refuses to give in. These instances do nothing but offend the people who are dangerous if set free. Shimada, after his liberty was granted by Jin, managed to contact the Shogun for reinforcements. Jin, who was allowed to live during the encounter where he was tricked by Rizzo, did nothing but become more angry and bloodthirsty against the Mongols and the Khan for killing Taka. It's as if the Khan aimed to teach these people a lesson who he deemed incapable of properly getting him back, severely underestimating his enemies. It almost makes me wonder if he looked at the people of Tsushima as below the Mongols. As the Khan made attempts to divide Shimada and Jin between each other and the people they aimed to serve, he would offer Shimada women, money, power, the opportunity to bring peace to Tsushima and then rule mainland Japan as the Khan's right-hand man. When he captured the Ghost, he alternatively would appeal to Jin's pride and family. He understands the love and loyalty he holds for his uncle, but aimed to use the ways of the ghost, the increasing myth of the legend, and the methods the legend implements that will only continue to disappoint his uncle as a way to drive that wedge, to tantalize Jin to switch sides. I felt it was important to point that out because it gives insight to how the Khan may have managed to secure the one traitor that he did, that being Rizzo. Looking deeper into the Khan's efforts to appeal to both Jin and Shimada, Rizzo's betrayal may actually be more complex than we really give it credit for, which I believe shows a great length the Khan's level of manipulation can really be if he understood the person he's dealing with and gave them the proper level of respect, perhaps even showing brutality a little later rather than immediately after his propositions were rejected. Now, Rizzo's betrayal is often seen as the coward's way to securing supplies for his Ronin, a move that was scummy but at least valiant in terms of trying to save his own people, even if it came at the cost of the island as a whole. But if we look at what the Khan offered Shimada and Jin, catering to personal vices and ambitions, it would then make sense Rizzo was offered much more than just supplies for his men. Perhaps a proper chance to right the wrong handed to him by his former friend Jin. During the game, Rizzo often talks of the tournament with Jin a few years before the Mongol invasion that cost him the title of a samurai. He was rejected a better life. It would then make sense for the Khan to appease Rizzo's desire for respect, honor, and the Ronin being its own samurai clan. It's plausible the personal slight he felt was another major motivating factor for him switching sides, masking it as the right thing to do for himself and for his men, who the Mongols initially fed quite well. When the Khan caught wind, the Ronin were allying with the Ghost, but the faction was in desperate need for supplies, it would soften up the resistance by breaking down their will to even fight. Why combat the army that treated them so handsomely when they're already winning the war? When most of Rizzo's men were captured, the Mongols fed them, and they fed them some of the best food they've had in quite some time. It's a tactic the Khan would have been wise to use towards everyone on the island, and I think he would have found his biggest supporters in Yarikawa. The region hated Shimada. Even when the town was locked under a heavy siege by the Mongols, the people of Yarikawa would rather stick to themselves, risk total annihilation over allying with the Jito, universally improving the island and Yarikawa's conditions. It was a completely selfish mentality. I'd rather go down, but at least we'll go down with our noses held high against the Jito. Now, had the Mongols hit the area softer, learned the land's deep-seated hatred against Shimada, their history of being a highly respected samurai clan, breeding the island's best swordsmen, and even understanding the origins of the rebellion. It was a rebellion of jealousy after all. Lord Tokiyasu Yarikawa was jealous of Clan Shimada, and he wanted to rule Tsushima, making the clan of Yarikawa the dominant clan on the island with Tokiyasu as the new Jito. When the rebellion was put down, Yarikawa was disbanded as a samurai clan and the region was exiled, creating a generation of people who hated Shimada. If the Mongols recognized the uses of a disbanded and exiled samurai clan and leveraged their desire for revenge and ambition to be a once great samurai clan on the island of Tsushima once more, they would have gained a massive boost in local popularity and manpower, especially if the war was portrayed as suffering brought upon them by Shimada. With the Ronin and people of Yarikawa fighting behind the Mongols, the war would have become more of a civil war, where the Mongols oversaw the fighting and cunningly positioned themselves as saviors as they did with Rizzo's men. Since this was never a war of dominance or conquest, rather a position to resupply, rearm, and ultimately prepare for the invasion of mainland Japan, going that route would have definitely bogged down the forces that were enemies of the Mongol Empire, essentially saving more Mongolian lives from perishing on the island of Tsushima and having the freedom to commit more of his own personal forces towards the mainland invasion, possibly even replacing any men he may have lost by recruits of Yarikawa or the Ronin.
You promised food for my men. Earn it.
From the treatment of Rizzo, forcing him to kill his fellow islanders as a way to earn the food he desperately wants for his men, forcing him to endure the shame and regret he may have as a traitor, to the failure of recognizing Yarikawa as a potential ally, and blundering other traitors such as Tomoe, possibly the island's most skilled archer who was teaching the Mongols Sensei Ishikawa's way of the bow. She was practically training an entire branch of the Mongolian army that would be damn near unstoppable in terms of archery. She went on to show them how to isolate entire towns, how to put them under siege with just a few well-placed archers, and the way to engineer better arrows that were a Japanese and Mongolian hybrid. She would create training camps, and eventually the Mongols would betray her, prematurely making her another enemy of the Mongols before her plans of strengthening their forces were even complete. Finally, the insult and underestimation of Shimida's will to resist and Jin's ever-continual deviation from his code, becoming an entirely different beast the Khan wouldn't be able to properly gauge or defeat, was all recognized at a time when it was ultimately too late. The Khan would be able to establish connections, and at times it did seem like he was flexible enough to make certain alliances work, but they never properly panned out. Maybe Tomoe and what Tamuge did at Yarikawa, offering not a chance to become an ally but a chance to just spare themselves from death and destruction, were occurrences left outside of the Khan's knowledge, signaling either an issue amongst the Mongolian hierarchy in terms of communication or a level of overconfidence in his men, allowing them to do as they saw fit at a moment's notice but being aware of what the overall goal of Tsushima ultimately was. Whatever the case, the Khan's rigidity in his plan and preconceived notion of the enemy he was facing resulted in the birth of the island's greatest legend and the death of the great Khotun Khan.